And now we clean up. Fall has officially arrived where I live, which means I needed to spend an entire morning meal prepping all of my favorite fall comfort foods, including no-knead sandwich bread, apple pie oatmeal bars, pumpkin baked oatmeal, butternut squash soup, and all the components of my favorite fall salad. All of these recipes are super easy to make, and you can find the recipes linked down below so you can make them yourself. Let's jump in. If you've never made homemade whole wheat bread, you need to try out this recipe. It is so easy and foolproof. So to start, you're just going to mix together some maple syrup, warm water, and yeast. Allow that mixture to sit until the yeast starts to activate, foam, and bubble, and you will be able to tell when it's ready when you have a nice foamy, frothy mixture. Next, you're going to add some whole wheat flour. I love using all whole wheat flour because that allows us to get more fiber and whole grains into our diet, and it just tastes great. Once you have your flour and salt added to the yeast mixture, you're just going to use a wooden spoon to stir this until a nice sticky dough forms. And you are going to stir this dough vigorously for about 30 seconds to 1 minute. Take the dough off your spoon, cover it with a towel, and let it sit for 1.5 hours. While the dough is making its first rise, I love to move on to other parts of my meal prep. So next up, I'm going to show you how to make some vegan pumpkin baked oatmeal. To start, you're going to whisk together all of your wet ingredients, including pumpkin puree, not to be confused with pumpkin pie filling, non-dairy milk, ground flaxseed, maple syrup for sweetness, vanilla extract, and spices like pumpkin pie spice, cinnamon, and baking powder and salt. Whisk that all together until smooth before adding in your rolled oats. And I personally love to add in some chocolate chips, but you could also add in some chopped pecans or walnuts, whatever you desire. Stir this together well before pouring it into an 8x8 or 9x9 greased baking dish and smoothing it out until nice and level. Then you're just going to pop this into the oven for about 30 to 35 minutes or until set, and you have got some beautiful pumpkin baked oatmeal. Next up, I'm going to show you my favorite fall-inspired dessert that I made this week called apple pie oatmeal bars. So to start, you're going to make the base, which is a mixture of flour, quick oats, cinnamon, baking powder, and salt, and you're going to stir this together until nice and combined. Then you're going to add in some melted vegan butter. You could also use refined coconut oil and some maple syrup. Stir this together well until a sticky dough forms, and then you're going to press this into the base of another 9x9 or 8x8 inch baking dish until nice and level. Once that's prepared, you are going to move on to your apple filling. So just slice up 2 large green apples into thin slices, put them in a bowl with some flour, brown sugar, and a lot of cinnamon, and stir that together well until all of the apples have been coated in the flour mixture, and you have your apple pie filling. Lastly, we're going to make the crumb topping with some chopped pecans, flour, brown sugar, and cinnamon. Stir that mixture together well before adding in some non-dairy vegan butter, and use either the back of a spoon or your fingers if you don't mind getting a little messy, and create a nice crumb topping. Now that you've got your other components, you're going to spoon those green apples coated in the flour mixture onto the base of your bars. Spread them out into a nice thin layer. I had to use my fingers to move some around and make them nice, flat, and compact. Then you're going to take that sticky crumb topping and break it up all over the apples. Press it down a bit if you need to, and pop this into the oven to bake for about 40 minutes or until golden and set, and you have these beautiful apple pie oatmeal bars. Before I move on to the next ingredients, I want to check in on my bread. So as you can see, my whole wheat bread dough has risen beautifully. I'm just going to stir it again for another 30 seconds before covering it with a towel and allowing it to rise for the second time for another hour and a half. Next up, we are going to make all the components of my favorite fall salad. And the great thing about the next ingredients I'm going to show you how to prepare is that they can be mixed and matched throughout the week, either in Buddha bowls, on salads, in a wrap, to create a bunch of delicious fall meals. So to start, we're going to roast some butternut squash. I am just coating some cubed butternut squash in oil, salt, and pepper and roasting them until nice and golden. Next up, I'm making a super simple citrusy vinaigrette with some orange juice, apple cider vinegar, olive oil, maple syrup, Dijon mustard, and a bunch of salt and pepper. I love to do this in a mason jar so I can just put the lid on and shake it until emulsified and well combined, and this just keeps in the fridge for ages and is a great dressing for salads and Buddha bowls throughout the week. Next up, I prepared some kale. Kale is a great green to meal prep as it doesn't get soggy as it sits in the fridge. So I'm just removing the stem from a head of kale, and as you can see, it just fills up this bowl. Next, I'm gonna massage it all down so that the leaves get tender and aren't super fibrous and tough. So I'm just pouring over a tablespoon or two of the citrus vinaigrette that I made, using my hands to massage the salad dressing into the greens and to loosen up the greens, make them less tough, and rip them apart into bite-sized pieces. Then I just store these lightly dressed greens in a container, and I can add them to salads or Buddha bowls throughout the week. Lastly, I am preparing some pomegranate Aerials? I have no idea how to say that actually. I've never said it out loud, but basically I am prepping the seeds of a pomegranate. So I love to cut my pomegranate into quarters and then in a large bowl filled with water so that I don't squirt juice all over my clothes and stain my clothes. I love to pop out the seeds and remove the pith. And then you have these beautiful jewels that add crunch and flavor to all your meals prepped and ready to go. Okay, let's check in on our bread one more time. As you can see, it has risen for the second time. I'm just going to degas it by stirring it for about 30 more seconds with my wooden spoon. Next to a greased loaf pan, I am going to place my dough. Using damp hands or as best as I can, I just like to spread the dough out so that it fills up the loaf pan. And then for the last time, I'm going to cover it with a plastic bag and allow it to rise for about 40 more minutes while I preheat my oven. Once the time has passed, I just remove the bag, and as you can see, it has risen yet again in the loaf pan, and I'm just going to pop this in the oven for about 40 to 45 minutes until beautifully baked and golden brown on top. Next up, we are making a creamy butternut squash soup. You can also use pumpkin, and we are adding a peanut butter twist. So I am just sauteing some fresh ginger in a little bit of olive oil before I add in some cubed butternut squash, onion, garlic, water, and vegetable broth. Then I'm going to bring this mixture to a boil, then reduce it to a simmer and allow it to cook for about 10 minutes until all of the veggies have been softened. Then I'm just going to use an immersion blender, or you can transfer this to a normal blender. Blend it until nice and smooth and creamy before adding in some cumin, pepper, salt, and stirring that well to combine. And then lastly, I love to add in some peanut butter. I know it sounds weird, but it adds richness, depth of flavor, and makes this soup a little bit heartier and perfect for these cold fall months. Last but not least, while everything is baking and simmering on the stovetop, I'm going to whip up some fluffy quinoa. So to a saucepan, I'm adding 1 cup of quinoa, 2 cups of veggie broth. I'm going to stir that well and bring the mixture to a boil without the lid on. Once it has come to a boil, I'm going to reduce it to a simmer and allow it to simmer for 15 minutes without the lid. Then I'm going to cover the pot, take the pan off of the heat, and allow it to steam for about 5 minutes before fluffing it with a fork and allowing it to cool, and then transferring it to an airtight container and storing it in the fridge. Now I have a bunch of different comforting, fall-inspired ingredients and recipes all prepped and ready to go throughout the week, including some fluffy quinoa, roasted butternut squash, apple pie baked oatmeal bars, different components for a hearty salad, pumpkin baked oatmeal for breakfast, soup, and fresh bread all ready to go. Everything should last for 4 to 5 days in the fridge. I just allow everything to cool completely before placing them in airtight containers in the fridge. For that fresh homemade bread, guys, look at this. You really need to try out this recipe. It's so easy, and I love to slice it all up and then stick it in the freezer if I know we won't get through it very quickly. But to be honest, this bread lasts us about 1 day in our house. So we just slice it as needed and toast it and put our favorite toppings on it. Then for a hearty fall salad, I just love to start with the base of the kale, add some quinoa, butternut squash, the pomegranate seeds, chopped nuts or seeds, and serve this with the dressing and a side of our butternut squash soup. Okay guys, those are all the fall inspired recipes I have for you today. Thanks for hanging out with me in the kitchen. Please be sure to give this video a like if you enjoy themed meal prep videos like this. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video, and I'll see you very soon. Bye!
so happy with you.